They say that mercy is the mark of a great king, but sometimes mercy is just a prettier word for torture. 3 years ago, Alpha King Varic Ironheart looked at his fated mate, Elowen, and saw a mistake. She was a dull wolf, a genetic defect with no scent, no shift, and no voice. His council told him she was weak. They told him a king needed a warrior, not a burden. So Varic rejected her, but he didn't exile her. He didn't let her run free to find a new life. He claimed he was a benevolent ruler. He claimed he was saving her from the harshness of the wilds. So he kept her. He stripped her of her title, put her in a grey dress, and forced her to become the personal handmaiden to the woman who took her place. For 3 years, Elowen has scrubbed the floors of the castle she was born to rule. For 3 years, she has poured wine for Lady Soraya, the cruel, ambitious Luna who wears Elowen's crown. Varic thinks Elowen is broken. He thinks she is nothing. He is wrong. Tonight, the red moon rises. Tonight, the crimson Sentinels, the immortal wolves of the First Age, are waking up to judge the kingdom. Varic has prepared a feast to impress them. He expects them to bow to his strength. He expects them to bless his reign. But the ancients do not care about kings. They do not care about armies. They care about blood. And when they walk into the great hall, they won't stop at the throne. They will walk right past the king, right past the queen, and they will kneel before the servant girl in the corner. The king forced her to serve. The ancients will force the king to bow. Chapter 1. The air in the Ironheart citadel tasted like rust and electricity. It was the taste of the Red Moon Summit, a celestial event that occurred only once every 500 years. The servants whispered that the moon was bleeding. The soldiers whispered that the gods were angry. But Elowen, kneeling on the cold stone floor of the royal preparation chamber, didn't have time for whispers. She only had time for the silver. Her hands, red and chapped from the lye soap, moved rhythmically over the surface of a massive wine chalice. It was heavy, encrusted with rubies the size of quail eggs. It was the king's ceremonial cup. Elowen caught her reflection in the polished metal. She looked tired. Her hair, once a vibrant honey gold, was pulled back into a severe, tight bun hidden under a scratchy linen cap. Her face was pale, devoid of makeup, her eyes dull and shadowed. She looked exactly like what they said she was, a dull wolf, a genetic dead end, a creature with no wolf spirit, no magic, and no future. She rubbed a smudge from the rim of the chalice. 3 years ago, she wouldn't have been polishing this cup. She would have been drinking from it. The memory hit her like a sudden drop in pressure. She remembered the throne room. She remembered the pity in Varic's eyes, that terrible, arrogant pity. "I cannot marry you, Elowen," he had said, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "The North needs a strong Luna. You are fragile. The winter would kill you. The politics would crush you." He hadn't been cruel, not like the others. He had been practical. He had explained it to her like one explains death to a child. He was rejecting their fated bond, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. "But I will not cast you out," he had promised, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I will keep you here. You will be cared for. You will serve the new queen. It is a place of honor in its own way." Honor. Elowen looked at the grey wool of her servant's dress. She looked at her raw knuckles. Varic had defined honor differently than she did. "You missed a spot." The voice was sharp, grating, and laced with false sweetness. Elowen didn't flinch. She was used to it. She lowered the chalice and bowed her head, staring at the floor. "Good evening, Lady Soraya." A pair of shoes entered her vision. They were made of white dragon leather, tipped with silver, with heels sharp enough to puncture skin. Lady Soraya, the Luna of the Ironheart pack, stood over her. Soraya was everything Elowen was not. She was tall, voluptuous, and radiated a scent of crushed roses and musk. It was a powerful scent, an alpha scent, though the castle gossips whispered that Soraya used alchemical perfumes to enhance it. "Stand up, dull thing," Soraya commanded. "Let me look at you." Elowen stood. She kept her eyes lowered. Eye contact was forbidden for a dull wolf. It was seen as a challenge. Soraya circled her, her silk gown rustling like dry leaves. She reached out and plucked at the sleeve of Elowen's grey dress. "Dismal," Soraya tutted. "Absolutely dismal. The Crimson Sentinels are arriving within the hour, Elowen. These are wolves from the First Age. They value beauty, strength, aesthetics. Having you hovering around the head table looking like a drowned rat will be an insult to my hospitality." "I will stay in the shadows, my lady," Elowen whispered. "I will be invisible." "You are always invisible," Soraya scoffed. "That is your only talent. But tonight I need you to be useful." Soraya snapped her fingers. A guard stepped forward from the hallway holding a velvet box. Soraya opened it. Inside lay a collar. It was exquisite, made of woven gold filigree, set with small amethysts, but it was unmistakable. It wasn't a necklace. It had no clasp, only a locking mechanism. It was a thrall's collar, a relic from the Dark Era when wolves kept humans as pets. Elowen's breath hitched. "My lady?" "Wear it," Soraya said, plucking the heavy gold band from the box. "It matches the table settings. It will show the ancients that we are a civilized kingdom, that we know how to adorn even our lesser creatures. Varic, the king, banned these," Elowen stammered, taking a step back. "He said they were barbaric." "The king is busy hyperventilating in the war room," Soraya snapped, her eyes flashing a dangerous yellow. "He is terrified of the Sentinels. He needs this dinner to go perfectly, and I decide what is perfect. Now, hold still." Soraya didn't wait for permission. She stepped forward, her alpha speed making her a blur. She slapped the collar around Elowen's neck and clicked it shut. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Click. The gold was cold against Elowen's skin. It was tight, pressing against her windpipe, a constant choking reminder of her station. "There," Soraya smiled, adjusting the gem in the center. "Now you look like you belong to someone important. You will pour the wine tonight, Elowen, and you will make sure my goblet is never empty. I want the ancients to see that I have a fated mate serving me. It asserts dominance." Soraya leaned in close, her perfume cloying and thick. "Don't embarrass me," she hissed, "or I will have you sleeping in the kennels with the hounds again." Soraya turned and swept out of the room, her laughter trailing behind her. Elowen stood alone in the preparation chamber. She reached up and touched the gold collar. It felt like a noose. She wanted to cry. She wanted to rip it off, but she had no strength. She was a dull wolf. Her body was weak, always aching with a deep, throbbing pain in her marrow that the healers couldn't explain. They said it was her lack of a wolf spirit causing her body to wither. Tonight, the pain was worse than usual. It started in her spine, a burning electric heat that pulsed in time with the rising of the moon outside. Thump, thump, thump. Elowen grabbed the edge of the table, gasping. The pain radiated outward, into her arms, into her jaw. It felt like her bones were trying to rearrange themselves. "Just the sickness," she whispered to herself, squeezing her eyes shut. "Just the dullness." She forced herself to breathe. She picked up the heavy silver tray laden with the king's chalice and the pitchers of wine. She had a job to do. She had to survive. She walked out of the chamber, the gold collar weighing her down, heading toward the great hall where the monsters of the past were coming to judge the cowards of the present. The great hall of the Ironheart citadel was a masterpiece of intimidation. The walls were lined with the skulls of beasts slain by Varic's ancestors. Banners of black and crimson hung from the rafters. 1,000 candles burned in iron chandeliers, casting long, dancing shadows. King Varic sat on the obsidian throne at the head of the high table. He looked majestic in his black armor, his crown of iron resting on his brow. But Elowen, standing in the shadows behind the wine casks, knew him better than anyone. She could see the tension in his jaw. She could see the way his hand kept drifting to the hilt of his sword. He was terrified. The Crimson Sentinels were a myth to most. They were the original enforcers of the wolf law, immortal warriors who slept in the crypts of the sacred mountain, only waking when the balance of the world shifted. They answered to no king. They could strip a pack of its territory with a single word. Beside Varic sat Soraya. She looked resplendent in a gown of red silk, the color of fresh blood. She was preening, touching her hair, checking her reflection in her spoon. She seemed oblivious to the danger, focused only on the pageantry. "They are late," Soraya whispered loudly. "Do you think they got lost? They have been asleep for 500 years. Perhaps they forgot how to read a map." "Silence, Soraya," Varic hissed, his eyes fixed on the massive double doors at the end of the hall. "They do not get lost. They arrive when they choose." Varic glanced around the room. His eyes landed on Elowen in the shadows. He paused, his gaze locked onto the golden collar around her neck. Elowen saw his eyes widen. He looked from the collar to Soraya, then back to Elowen. A flicker of something crossed his face. Shame? Anger? He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to order it removed. Boom! The sound was not a knock. It was a physical impact that shook the stone foundation of the castle. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The candles flickered violently, half of them extinguishing instantly, plunging the room into a semi-darkness. The heavy oak doors, reinforced with steel bands, groaned. The locking bar, a beam of wood as thick as a man's thigh, splintered with a sound like a gunshot. The doors swung open slowly. A wind blew into the hall. It wasn't the cold wind of the north. It was a dry, ancient wind. It smelled of old blood, ozone, and petrified wood. Silence descended on the hall. The musicians stopped playing. The guards gripped their spears, their knuckles white. 3 figures stood in the doorway. They were massive. They did not look like the refined, courtly wolves of the modern era. They looked like weapons forged in a darker time. They wore armor made of strange, dull metal that seemed to absorb the light. They carried swords on their backs that were too large for normal men to lift. The figure in the center stepped forward. He was a giant, standing nearly 7 feet tall. His face was a map of scars, his skin the color of weathered bronze. His hair was white, not from age, but from the sheer intensity of the spirit pressure radiating from him. His eyes were not human, nor wolf. They were burning coals of molten gold. This was General Kale, the first Fang, the wolf who killed the dragon of the East. He didn't announce himself. He didn't bow. He walked into the hall. His footsteps were heavy, echoing like hammer strikes. Clang, clang, clang. Behind him, 2 other sentinels followed, a female with a spear and a male with twin axes. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that made the castle guards look like clumsy children. They walked down the center aisle. They didn't look at the banners. They didn't look at the terrified nobles. They walked straight toward the dais. Varic stood up. He forced himself to look regal. He spread his arms in greeting. "General Kyle," Varic announced, his voice steady but strained. "The Ironheart pack welcomes the Sentinels. We are honored by your—" Kyle didn't stop. He didn't even look at Varic. He walked past the king. He walked past the throne. He walked past Soraya, who had frozen with her wineglass halfway to her mouth. The general walked to the edge of the dais, toward the shadows where the servants stood. Varic blinked, confused. "General, the feast is—" Kyle stopped. He stood in front of the wine casks. Elowen was pressed against the wall, trying to merge with the stone. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. The pain in her bones was blinding now. The presence of the ancients made her blood feel like it was boiling. Kyle stood 5 feet away from her. He closed his eyes. He inhaled deeply, tasting the air. He opened his eyes. The molten gold gaze locked onto Elowen. He looked at the grey dress. He looked at the raw hands, and then his gaze dropped to the golden collar around her neck. A low growl started in Kyle's chest. It was a sound so deep it vibrated the silverware on the tables. It wasn't a growl of aggression, it was a growl of outrage. "General," Varic asked, stepping down from the dais, looking nervous. "Is something wrong? That is just a servant. She is a dull wolf, a mute. Ignore her." Kyle turned his head slowly to look at Varic. The movement was reptilian. "Dull?" Kyle's voice was like grinding boulders. "You call this dull?" He turned back to Elowen. The pain in Elowen's spine reached a crescendo. She gasped, dropping the silver pitcher she was holding. Clang! Red wine splashed across the floor, staining the hem of her grey dress. "You clumsy idiot!" Soraya shrieked, seizing the moment to assert control, trying to break the terrifying tension. "Look what you've done! You spilled wine in front of the ancients." Soraya stood up, her face twisted in a sneer. "Clean it up, now, on your knees, you useless creature." Elowen fell to her knees, not because she was ordered to, but because her legs gave out. The proximity of the general was overwhelming her system. She scrambled for a rag, her hands shaking, trying to wipe up the red puddle. "I'm sorry," Elowen whispered. "I'm sorry." She was on her knees, in the wine, with a collar around her neck, scrubbing the floor while the most powerful wolves in history watched. General Kale watched her hand scrubbing the stone. He watched the way the collar dug into her neck. He reached up and unbuckled the massive sword from his back. The sound of the blade leaving the scabbard was a high, singing note. Varic panicked. He drew his own sword. "General, stay back. She is clumsy, but she is my property. You cannot execute a servant for spilling wine." Kyle ignored the king. He ignored the sword pointed at his back. He took a step toward Elowen. Elowen squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the blow. She waited for the execution, but the blow never came. Instead, she heard a heavy thud, the sound of metal hitting stone. She opened her eyes. General Kale, the immortal warrior, the scourge of the First Age, was not swinging his sword. He was kneeling. He had dropped to one knee in the puddle of spilled wine, ruining his armor. He placed his massive sword on the floor, the hilt pointing toward Elowen. He bowed his head, exposing his neck, the ultimate sign of submission. The 2 sentinels behind him did the same. They dropped to their knees, their weapons hitting the floor with a clatter. The great hall went silent, dead silent. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. King Varic stood with his sword half raised, his mouth open in shock. Soraya looked like she had been slapped. General Kale raised his head. He looked at Elowen with eyes full of reverence and ancient sadness. "We have searched the stars and the earth for 500 years, Kale rumbles, his voice trembling with emotion. He reached out a scarred hand, hovering it near Elowen's cheek, but not daring to touch her. "Why?" the general asked, his voice booming through the silent hall. "Is the Empress of the Spirit Walkers scrubbing the floor of a pup?" Chapter 2. The great hall of the Ironheart Citadel had seen weddings, executions, and war councils. But it had never seen this. 3 immortal warriors, wolves who were woven into the very nursery rhymes of the kingdom, were kneeling in a puddle of spilled wine. And they were not kneeling to the king on his obsidian throne. They were kneeling to the servant girl who scrubbed the floors. General Kale, the first Fang, kept his head bowed. The tip of his massive sword rested against the stone, pointing toward Elowen's trembling feet. King Varic stood frozen on the dais. His sword was half drawn, his mouth slightly open. He looked at the general, then at Elowen. His mind, usually sharp and tactical, was misfiring. "General!" Varic's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, trying to summon the authority of an alpha. "General Kyle, I believe the long sleep has clouded your senses. That is Elowen. She is a servant. She is a dull wolf. She has no spirit. Kyle didn't move. He didn't look at the king. He spoke to the floor, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the soles of everyone's shoes. "A dull wolf," Kyle repeated, tasting the words like they were poison. "That is what the ignorant call a vessel that is too small for its god." Slowly, Kyle rose. He stood up, towering over Elowen. He didn't loom like a threat. He loomed like a mountain protecting a flower. He looked at the golden collar around her neck. His molten gold eyes narrowed. "Who put this on her?" Kyle asked. The question was soft, but the air in the room suddenly grew hot. The candles flared, the flames turning a strange, unnatural blue. Soraya, standing by the throne, let out a nervous, high-pitched laugh. "I did," she said, smoothing her silk dress. "It is a sign of her station, General. She's a pet, a mute thing. It suits her, don't you think?" Kale turned his head. He looked at Soraya. Soraya stopped laughing. The color drained from her face. She took a step back, bumping into the throne. "A pet," Kyle whispered. He turned back to Elowen. She was still on her knees, shaking, clutching the wet rag. She was terrified. She thought this was a trick. She thought they were mocking her. "Stand up, Empress," Kyle said gently. I can't," Elowen whispered, her voice rasping from disuse. "My legs, the pain." "The pain is your power eating your bones," Kyle said. He reached out a hand. "Take my hand. Let the circuit close." Elowen hesitated. She looked at Varic, waiting for permission. "Do not look at him," Kyle commanded, his voice hardening. "He's a boy playing with a crown. Look at me." Elowen reached out. Her hand, red and chapped, touched the general's scarred bronze palm. Zap. A visible spark of white electricity snapped between them. Elowen gasped. The pain in her spine didn't vanish, but it changed. It stopped being a dull ache and became a hum, a vibration. She stood up. For the first time in 3 years, her legs didn't feel like wet clay. "What is happening?" Varic demanded, stepping down from the dais. "General, explain yourself. Why do you call her Empress? She has no wolf. I checked. The healers checked." "Your healers are fools," Kyle spat, not letting go of Elowen's hand. "They looked for a wolf inside her skin, but a spirit walker does not carry a wolf inside. She is the gate." Kyle turned to the room, addressing the terrified nobles. 500 years ago, the spirit walkers were the bridge between this world and the spirit plane. They were rare, dangerous. Their spirits were so massive, so ancient, that they could not manifest in a child's body. So nature hid them. It masked their scent. It suppressed their shift. It made them appear dull until they were strong enough to survive the transformation. He looked at Elowen. "You thought you were broken," he said softly. "You thought you were empty, but you are not empty, little one. You are so full that your body is cracking apart trying to hold it in." Elowen stared at him. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm not broken." "No," Kyle said. Then his eyes drifted to the collar again. "But you are being choked." He reached for the collar. "Don't touch it!" Soraya shrieked. The queen ran down the steps of the dais. She was panicking. The narrative was slipping away from her. The servant was getting attention. The ancients were bowing to the mute. "That collar is property of the crown," Soraya yelled, her face twisted and ugly. "She is my servant. You cannot just walk in here and claim her with fairy tales about spirit walkers. She is a defect, a genetic mistake." Soraya turned to Varic. "Tell him, Varic. Tell him she is yours to discard." Varic looked at Elowen. He looked at the way she was standing, taller now, holding the general's hand. He remembered the nights he had spent guilt-ridden, wondering if he had done the right thing. "General," Varic said, his voice measured, "if what you say is true, if she is powerful, then she belongs to the Ironheart pack. I am the Alpha King. Her power is my power." Kyle laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You rejected her," Kyle said. "I can smell the broken bond on her skin. It smells like rot." "I rejected a dull wolf," Varic argued, desperation creeping in. "I did it for the kingdom. I needed a strong heir. I didn't know." "Ignorance is not a shield, boy king," Kyle growled. "You threw away a diamond because you were too stupid to polish it." "This is a trick," Soraya screamed. "It's a trick. She's bewitched them. She's using slave magic." Soraya grabbed a silver carving knife from the head table. Her eyes were yellow with madness. She couldn't stand it. She couldn't stand being ignored. She couldn't stand seeing the pet rise. "I'll show you she's mortal," Soraya shrieked. "I'll show you she bleeds like any other rat." Soraya lunged. She moved with alpha speed, enhanced by her alchemical perfumes. She aimed the carving knife straight at Elowen's chest. "Soraya, no!" Varic shouted, reaching out. But he was too far away. General Kale could have stopped her. He could have decapitated Soraya with a flick of his wrist, but he didn't move. He stood still, holding Elowen's hand. He looked at her, and his eyes said, "Wake up." Elowen saw the knife coming. She saw the hate in Soraya's eyes. For 3 years, she had taken the abuse. She had taken the insults. She had taken the collar, but she would not take the knife. Something deep inside her, the thing that had been aching in her bones, the thing that had been dull, snapped. It wasn't a sound, it was a feeling, like a dam breaking. Elowen opened her mouth. Chapter 3. The scream that tore from Elowen's throat was not human. It wasn't the howl of a wolf, either. It was the sound of a tear in the fabric of reality. It was the sound of 1,000 bells ringing at once, overlaid with the roar of a storm. Soraya was midair, the knife inches from Elowen's heart. When Elowen screamed, the air around her detonated. Boom! A shockwave of pure white energy exploded outward from the servant girl. It hit Soraya like a cannonball. The queen was lifted off her feet and thrown backward, flying 30 feet through the air. She smashed into one of the stone pillars with a sickening crunch, sliding down to the floor, unconscious. But the explosion didn't stop there. The energy swirled around Elowen, blindingly bright. "The gate is open!" General Kale roared, stepping back, shielding his eyes. "Behold the spirit wolf!" Elowen's body arched back. She didn't shift. Her bones didn't break. Her fur didn't grow. A spirit walker does not change their skin. They project their soul. From Elowen's back, a massive shape erupted. It was a wolf, but it was made of starlight. It was translucent, glowing with a fierce blue-white luminescence. And it was huge. It stood 12 feet tall at the shoulder, its head brushing the chandeliers. Its paws were made of mist. Its eyes were twin supernovas. The spectral wolf stood over Elowen, growling at the room. The sound wasn't audible. It was psychic. Every wolf in the hall felt the growl in their teeth. Submit. The command wasn't spoken. It was imposed. The sheer weight of the spirit wolf's aura crushed the room. The guards dropped their spears. The nobles fell out of their chairs, scrambling to kneel. King Varic, the alpha of alphas, the Ironheart, felt his knees buckle. His own wolf, usually a roaring beast, was whimpering, curling into a ball in the back of his mind. This wasn't an alpha. This was a titan. Varic fell to his knees. He looked up, terrified, at the glowing avatar towering over his rejected mate. Elowen stood in the center of the storm. Her eyes were glowing white. Her hair had come loose from the servant's cap, floating around her face as if she were underwater. She reached up to her neck. The golden collar, the symbol of her slavery, the jewelry Soraya had claimed proved her dominance, began to glow red. The heat of Elowen's spirit was melting the gold. Elowen didn't unbuckle it. She grabbed it with both hands. Elowen spoke. Her voice echoed, layered with the growl of the giant spectral wolf above her. "I am not a pet." She pulled. Snap. The gold shattered. Molten droplets fell to the floor, hissing against the stone. Elowen threw the broken pieces aside. She took a deep breath. For the first time in 3 years, her airway was clear. For the first time in her life, she wasn't in pain. She felt light. She felt infinite. The spectral wolf lowered its massive head, nuzzling Elowen's shoulder. She reached up and touched its nose. It was solid to her touch, though it looked like smoke. She turned her gaze to the dais, to the king on his knees. General Kale and the other 2 sentinels stepped forward. They turned their backs to Elowen, facing the room, drawing their weapons. They formed a triangle of steel around her. "The Empress is awake," Kyle announced, his voice ringing in the silence. "The judgment begins." Soraya groaned from the base of the pillar. She tried to stand, coughing up blood. Her dress was torn, her hair a mess. She looked at Elowen, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in her eyes, only pure, unadulterated terror. "Monster!" Soraya wheezed. "She's a monster!" Elowen looked at Soraya. The spectral wolf snarled, snapping its jaws in Soraya's direction. Soraya flinched, covering her head. Elowen began to walk toward the dais. The spectral wolf walked with her, its massive paws passing through the tables and chairs as if they weren't there. Varic watched her come. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't work. The pressure was too great. "Elowen," Varic whispered. "Please." She stopped in front of him. She looked down at the man who had been her world, the man who had promised to protect her, then handed her a mop. "Stand up, Varic," Elowen commanded. The compulsion in her voice was absolute. Varic stood, shaking. "You wanted a strong Luna," Elowen said, her voice calm now, but cold as the void between stars. "You wanted a wolf who could defend the kingdom. Is this strong enough for you?" She gestured to the massive spirit beast behind her. It is magnificent," Varic stammered. "Elowen, I didn't know. If I had known—" "If you had known I was powerful, you would have kept me," Elowen finished for him. "That is not love, Varic. That is investment." "I saved you," Varic argued, desperation making him bold. "I kept you in the castle. I could have exiled you to the Rogue Lands. You would have died. I gave you a roof. I gave you food." "You gave me a cage," Elowen roared. The spectral wolf roared with her, blowing the windows out of their frames. "You fed me scraps from your table while that woman," she pointed at Soraya, "treated me like a dog. And you watched. You watched her put the collar on me tonight. You said nothing." "I was afraid," Varic admitted, the truth finally ripping out of him. "I was afraid of the ancients. I needed the alliance. I am a king, Elowen. I have to make hard choices." "And now," General Kale interrupted, stepping up beside Elowen, "you must face the consequences of those choices." Kyle looked at Elowen. He offered her the hilt of his massive sword. "The law of the First Age is clear, Empress," Kyle rumbled. "A king who enslaves a spirit walker forfeits his life. Give the word, and I will take his head." Varic's eyes went wide. He looked at the massive blade. He looked at Elowen. "Elowen, we are fated," Varic pleaded. "The bond. It's still there. I can feel it. You can feel it. Don't kill me. Let me make it right. I will banish Soraya. I will put the crown on your head. We can rule together. The Ironheart and the Spirit Walker. We would be invincible." Elowen looked at him. She looked at the sweat on his brow. She looked at the fear in his eyes. She reached out and touched his chest. Varic smiled, relief flooding his face. He thought he had won. He thought the bond had saved him. "I can feel the bond," Elowen whispered. "It's a thin, gray string." She grabbed the invisible bond in her mind. "And I don't want it anymore." She closed her fist. Snap. Varic screamed. He clutched his chest, falling back against the throne. The rejection was physical. It felt like she had reached inside his ribs and torn out a piece of his lung. "You rejected me 3 years ago," Elowen said. her eyes dry. "I am just returning the favor." She turned to Kyle. She looked at the sword. "No," Elowen said. "Do not kill him." Varic gasped for air, looking up at her with tear-filled eyes. "Thank you. Thank you." "Death is too easy," Elowen said cold. "He wanted to be a king. Let him be a king, but he will be a king of nothing." She looked at the assembled nobles who were still kneeling. "The Crimson Sentinels answer to me," Elowen announced, "and I declare that the Ironheart pack is no longer under their protection. The ancient alliance is broken." A gasp went through the room. Without the protection of the ancients, the Ironheart kingdom was vulnerable. Their enemies would circle. Their status was gone. "You cannot," Varic cried. "That is a death sentence for the kingdom." "Then you better start fighting, Varic," Elowen said. "You wanted to be strong. Show them." She turned around. "General, we are leaving." "Where to, Empress?" Kyle asked, sheathing his sword. "To the sacred mountain," Elowen said, looking at the open doors, at the night sky. "I have a lot to learn, and I need a pack that knows how to kneel." She began to walk out. The spectral wolf walked with her, fading slowly back into her skin as the adrenaline waned, but leaving an aura of starlight around her. Soraya, still on the floor, watched her go. "You're just a servant," she shrieked weakly. "You're a nobody." Elowen stopped. She looked back over her shoulder. The broken pieces of the golden collar glittered on the floor. "I was a servant," Elowen said. "Now I am the storm." She walked out into the night, the three ancient wolves flanking her like a royal guard. Varic sat on his throne. He was alive. He had his crown. He had his castle. But as he looked at the empty doorway, feeling the phantom pain of the severed bond in his chest, he realized the truth. He had traded a goddess for a title. And now he would have to watch from his cold iron chair as she ruled the world without him. The red moon faded above, but the reign of the Spirit Walker had just begun. Chapter 4. The silence that followed the snapping of the mate bond was louder than the scream that had preceded it. King Varic Ironheart slumped against his obsidian throne, clutching his chest. He gasped for air, his face gray and slick with sweat. The physical pain was excruciating, like a hot iron branding his heart, but the spiritual emptiness was worse. For 3 years, even while he ignored her, even while he humiliated her, the bond had been there. It had been a hum in the back of his mind, a tether that grounded him. Now it was gone. The tether was cut. He was adrift in the cold, dark void of his own making. You broke it!" Varic wheezed, looking up at Elowen with disbelief. "You actually broke it." Elowen stood before him, bathed in the fading blue light of her spirit wolf. She didn't look tired. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved. "I didn't break it, Varic," she said, her voice calm and final. "I just stopped holding on to the rope you let go of 3 years ago." She turned her back on him. It was a simple motion, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a sentence. She looked at the great hall. The nobles were still on their knees, terrified to move. The candles were gutted. The stained glass was shattered. The floor was stained with wine and the melted gold of the collar she had worn. "General Kale," Elowen said softly. The massive ancient warrior stepped to her side instantly, his head bowed. "Empress?" "We are leaving," Elowen said. "I am done with this place. It smells of dust and regret." "As you command," Kyle rumbled. He turned to his 2 lieutenants. "Secure the perimeter. We escort the Empress to the sacred mountain." "Wait!" The shriek came from the floor. Lady Soraya, battered and bleeding from where the spirit wolf's shockwave had thrown her, dragged herself upright against a stone pillar. Her red silk dress was shredded. Her alchemical perfume had turned sour, smelling of burnt sugar and panic. "You can't just leave," Soraya screamed, staggering forward. She pointed a trembling finger at Kyle. You are the Crimson Sentinels. You are sworn to protect the Ironheart line, the treaties, the ancient pacts. You cannot abandon the king because of a servant's temper tantrum." General Kale stopped. He turned slowly to look at Soraya. His golden eyes were devoid of pity. "The pact was made with the Spirit Walkers," Kyle said, his voice filling the hall. "The Ironheart Kings were merely the guardians of the gate. We protected your line because you harbored the blood of the Empress." He gestured to Elowen. "She is the gate. She is the pact. Where she goes, we go. If she walks into the sea, we will drown. If she walks into the fire, we will burn. And if she walks out of this castle—" Kyle looked at Varic, who was staring at him with dawning horror. "Then this castle is no longer under our protection." The weight of those words settled on the room like a shroud. The Ironheart Kingdom was powerful, yes, but their true strength, the thing that kept the bordering empires from invading, was the legend of the Crimson Sentinels, the belief that if the Ironheart fell, the Ancients would wake. Now the Ancients were awake, and they were leaving. "General, please," Varic begged, pulling himself up to sit on the edge of his throne. "If you leave—" "The Frost Giants to the north, the Dragon Clans to the east, they will smell our weakness. They will attack. My people, they will be slaughtered." "Then pick up a sword, boy king," Kale sneered, "and fight for them. You are so eager to prove your strength. You are so eager to cast aside the weak girl who served you wine. Now you have your wish. You are strong. You are alone. Defend your kingdom without the crutch of her bloodline." Kyle turned his back on the king. "Elowen," Soraya hissed, changing tactics. She crawled forward, her pride shattered by survival instinct. "Elowen, wait, you can't do this. We are family." "Sort of. I took you in. I gave you a job." Elowen stopped. She looked down at the woman who had put a collar on her an hour ago. "You gave me a collar, Soraya," Elowen said quietly. "I was trying to help you." Soraya lied, her eyes darting around the room, looking for support that wasn't there. "I gave you purpose. Look at you now. You're powerful. You wouldn't be this strong if I hadn't pushed you." "I made you." Elowen laughed. It was a cold, clear sound. "You didn't make me," Elowen said. "You just cracked the shell." She leaned in, her eyes glowing faintly with the residual energy of the spirit wolf. "You wanted to be the Luna, Soraya. You wanted the crown. Keep it. It's heavy. It's cold. And now it comes with a war on every border." Elowen straightened up. She looked at the nobles cowering in the hall. "The Ironheart Kingdom is free," she announced. "Free of the Ancients, free of the Pact, and free of me." She began to walk toward the shattered doors. The Crimson Sentinels fell into formation around her. A phalanx of immortal steel protecting the girl in the grey dress. They moved with a synchronized, heavy rhythm that shook the floor. Thud, thud, thud. Varic watched them go. He felt the panic rising in his throat, a primal, suffocating terror. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. He looked at his sword. It looked like a toy compared to the blade Kale carried. He realized, with a sickening jolt, that he had never really been the powerful Alpha King. He had been a mascot standing on the shoulders of giants he didn't understand. "Elowen!" Varic shouted, stumbling down the steps of the dais. He ignored Soraya, stepping over her legs. He ran down the aisle, chasing the woman he had rejected. "Elowen, stop! Just listen!" He caught up to them at the threshold of the castle. The night air was rushing in, cold and sharp. The red moon hung low in the sky, bathing the courtyard in the color of dried blood. The sentinels turned, blocking his path with a wall of muscle and armor. Kyle reached for his sword hilt. "Let him speak," Elowen said softly. The sentinels parted, allowing Varic to see her. She stood in the moonlight. The grey servant's dress was stained with wine and dirt, but she looked radiant. The pain that had curved her spine for 3 years was gone. She stood tall, ethereal, a creature of 2 worlds. "What is it, Varic?" she asked. Varic stood there, panting. He looked at her face, the face he had known since childhood, the face he had loved, then pitied, then ignored. "I loved you," he whispered. In my own way. I did love you." Elowen looked at him. Her expression softened, just a fraction. It was the only mercy she would grant him. "I know," she said. "You loved me enough to keep me alive. But you didn't love me enough to let me live." She pointed to the vast, dark horizon beyond the castle walls. "You loved your kingdom more. You chose the crown, Varic. Tonight, I am just letting you keep your choice." "I made a mistake," Varic wept, falling to his knees on the cobblestones. "I made a terrible mistake. Please, don't leave me here alone. I don't know how to save them without you." "Then learn," Elowen said. She turned away. "General," she commanded, "we walk." "To the mountain," Kyle confirmed. The group moved out. Elowen, flanked by the monsters of legend, walked out of the citadel gates. She walked past the guards who lowered their spears in awe. She walked past the stables where she used to sleep. She walked into the dark forest, her path illuminated by the faint starlit glow of her own spirit. She didn't look back. Not once. Varic remained on his knees in the courtyard. The wind howled through the open gates, carrying the scent of snow and incoming war. Behind him, in the ruined great hall, Soraya began to scream, a high, shrill sound of frustration and pain. The nobles began to argue, their voices rising in panic as they realized their protection was gone. The kingdom of the Ironheart was already beginning to crumble. Varic looked down at the cobblestones. He saw something glittering in the moonlight. It was a piece of the golden collar, a single link of twisted gold, melted and broken. He reached out and picked it up. It was cold. He clutched it in his fist, squeezing until the metal bit into his palm, until blood welled up to mix with the dirt. "She was the storm," Varic whispered to the empty night. "And I tried to put her in a bottle." He closed his eyes, listening to the fading footsteps of the Empress he had made a servant. The red moon set behind the mountains, plunging the world into darkness. And for the first time in the history of the Ironheart Pack, the king was afraid of the dark.